David Kennedy gazed into the hungry compound eyes of the venomous thornmaw, refusing to let the alien beast see his fear as its barbed tail whipped back and forth. This was no mere animal. This was a challenge, a test set before him and all of humanity by the arrogant Chalnoth. A test they could not afford to fail. The icy relations between humans and Chalnoth had endured for 30 long years, ever since that fateful first contact mission ended in bloodshed and recrimination. The Chalnoth saw humans as little more than violent, impulsive primates. Humans in turn resented the Chalnoth's cold, calculating brand of xenophobia. This joint project, a wildlife sanctuary to protect Zephiria's deadliest creatures, was meant to be an olive branch, a way to thaw the permafrost of bitterness and distrust. But David's Chalnoth partner Pollux had other plans. The high-ranking alien bureaucrat was openly contemptuous of humanity's animal taming abilities. He snidely proposed a wager before the Chalnoth leadership. Let the human train the thornmaw, the monstrous quake boar, and the elusive shadow wraith, the three most vicious beasts on Zephyria. Creatures even the Chalnoth could not control. If David failed even once, the sanctuary would be scrapped. Humanity would be banished from the planet entirely. But if he somehow succeeded, the Chalnoth would share their advanced technology with Earth, and Pollux would become David's subordinate. It was a sucker's bet, and they both knew it. But with the future of both their species on the line, David had no choice. If the sanctuary wasn't established, a rival Chalnoth faction planned to bulldoze the habitat for factories, driving the beasts to extinction. Human-Chalnoth relations would freeze over for good. Everything depended on David's skills now. The thornmaw hissed, bearing rows of envenomed fangs as it coiled to strike. David exhaled slowly and stepped forward to meet it. Time to show this alien how humans tame the untamable. David waded through the thick, brackish water of the thornmaw's swampland habitat, his environmental suit shielding him from the caustic elements. The creature's hisses echoed through the twisted mangroves as it sensed the human's approach. Pollux and the other Chalnoth watched from a floating observation platform, their compound eyes narrowed in skepticism. "The human is a fool," Pollux scoffed. "He'll be impaled on those venomous spines within minutes." But David had a plan. He activated a small device on his wrist, which emitted a complex array of pheromones and subsonic pulses. The thornmaw paused, its barbed tail twitching uncertainly. David moved closer, his movements slow and deliberate. "Easy now," he murmured, his voice amplified and translated by his suit's audio system. "I'm not here to hurt you." To the Chalnoth's amazement, the thornmaw seemed to respond to David's soothing words and gestures. It lowered its tail, allowing the human to gently place his hand on its armored hide. With great care, David extracted a sample of the creature's venom, knowing it could be used to create life-saving antidotes. Emboldened by his success, David confronted the quake boar next. The ground trembled with each step of the massive beast, its tusks capable of goring an armored vehicle. Using a hover drone, David maneuvered above the creature and deployed a neural link device. The quake boar snorted in confusion as unfamiliar sensations flooded its primitive mind. Through the link, David projected calming imagery and sensations. He showed the quake boar that it could coexist peacefully with the Chalnoth, guiding it away from unstable geological zones and into a tranquil valley. The creature huffed contentedly, no longer a threat to the nearby settlements. For his final test, David ventured into the Shadow Wraith's mountain lair. The infrared scanner built into his helm pierced the inky darkness, revealing the predator's heat signature. David activated a series of bioluminescent lures, casting an eerie blue glow across the cavern walls. The Shadow Wraith emerged from the shadows, its silvery fur dripping with suspicion. David activated his suit's holographic emitters, creating multiple images of himself to confuse the creature. As the Shadow Wraith hesitated, David released a cloud of synthesized pheromones. The predator's posture relaxed, and it slowly approached one of the holograms, sniffing curiously. From their observation post, Pollux and the other Chalnoth could hardly believe what they were seeing. The human had tamed 3 of Zephyria's deadliest creatures, not through force or domination, but through understanding and communication. It was a humbling realization for the proud Chalnoth, who had long dismissed humans as primitive and irrational. As David emerged from the Shadow Wraith's lair, triumphant, news of his exploits began to spread among the Chalnoth. Many who had once opposed the Sanctuary Project now saw the wisdom in it, recognizing the potential for peaceful coexistence with Zephyria's wildlife. But not everyone was pleased with David's success. In shadowed halls and secret meetings, members of a rival faction plotted to sabotage the humans' efforts. They saw the sanctuary as a threat to their own ambitions and were determined to undermine it by any means necessary. As David and his allies celebrated their progress, dark clouds gathered on the horizon. The battle for the sanctuary and the future of human-Chalnoth relations was nowhere near the end. David wiped the sweat from his brow as he surveyed the progress on the wildlife sanctuary. The Chalnoth workers moved with machine-like efficiency, erecting towering force field generators and laying down intricate sensor grids. He allowed himself a small smile. They were ahead of schedule. A sudden explosion rocked the site. Alarms blared as the force fields flickered and died. David's stomach dropped as he saw 3 familiar shapes dart into the shadows. "No, no, no!" He sprinted toward the nearest comm panel. "This is Kennedy! We have a code red! I repeat, code red!" Chaos erupted in the nearby Chalnoth residential sector. The Thornmaw's distinctive hiss echoed through the streets as civilians fled in terror. Buildings shook and cracked as the quake boar rampaged unchecked. Screams pierced the air as the Shadow Wraith struck from the darkness. Pollux burst into the command center, his compound eyes blazing with fury. "What in the 7 hells is going on, human?" "Sabotage," David said grimly. "Someone disabled the containment fields." "Impossible," Pollux snarled. "Our security is impenetrable." A junior officer spoke up hesitantly. "Sir, we've detected traces of stealth tech consistent with the rival factions." "Speculation helps no one," Pollux snapped. He turned to David. "Your beasts are killing my people. We must put them down immediately." "No," David pleaded. "Give me a chance to bring them in safely. If we kill them now, everything we've worked for is lost." Pollux's mandibles clicked in agitation. "And if you fail?" David met the alien's gaze. "Then I'll face the consequences, but I won't give up on them." Without waiting for a response, David grabbed his gear and raced out into the chaos. The Thornmaw's trail was easy to follow, a path of terrified civilians and corroded infrastructure. David activated his pheromone emitter, flooding the air with a synthetic musk. The creature's hisses grew confused, then inquisitive. It slithered into view, its venomous spines glistening. "That's it, big guy," David coaxed. "Follow me." He led the Thornmaw on a winding path, always staying just out of striking distance. With agonizing slowness, he guided it into a prepared containment field. The force field snapped to life, and David sagged with relief. 1 down, 2 to go. The ground trembled beneath his feet as he sought out the quake boar. He found the beast demolishing an office complex, its tusks carving through steel and concrete. David activated his neural link, wincing at the creature's confusion and fear. "Easy, friend," he projected through the link. "Remember me? Let's go somewhere quieter." The quake boar's rampage slowed. It turned toward David, snuffling curiously. He concentrated on projecting calming imagery. Lush fields, cool caves. With gentle mental nudges, he coaxed the creature away from the population center. "Good boy," David murmured as he led it into a reinforced enclosure. "You did great." The Shadow Wraith proved the most challenging quarry. Its adaptive camouflage made it nearly impossible to track. David prowled through darkened streets, every sense on high alert. A flicker of movement caught his eye. A Chalnoth child, separated from its parents. The air shimmered behind the youngling. David's heart raced. He had one shot at this. He triggered his ultraviolet projectors, flooding the area with invisible light. The shadow wraith's outline became visible for a split second, long enough for David to fire his sonic stunner. The creature materialized fully as it collapsed, mere inches from the terrified child. David scooped up the youngling, handing it off to a grateful parent before securing the shadow wraith. He sagged against a wall, utterly spent. "It's done," he reported wearily. "All three are contained." The backlash was immediate and vicious. Chalnoth crowds demanded blood, both David's and the creature's. But as the dust settled and casualty reports came in, a startling fact emerged. Not a single life had been lost. Pollux regarded David with newfound respect. "Perhaps," he said slowly, "there is more to your species than we realized." David allowed himself a tired grin. "Does this mean the Sanctuary Project is back on track?" Before Pollux could answer, a stun bolt struck David in the back. As consciousness faded, he glimpsed several cloaked figures emerging from the shadows. Then darkness claimed him. Pollux stared in shock as the human was dragged away by members of the rival faction. For the first time in his long career, he found himself truly conflicted. The human had proven himself beyond all expectations, but to side with him now would mean betraying everything Pollux had been raised to believe about his people's destiny. He had a choice to make, and the fate of two species hung in the balance. David's head throbbed as consciousness returned. He found himself in a stark metal cell, wrists bound behind his back. Through the pounding in his skull, memories started to trickle back. The sabotage, recapturing the creatures, then nothing. A door hissed open. David squinted against the harsh light as a towering Chalnoth entered. Unlike Pollux's bureaucratic robes, this one wore sleek combat armor. "David Kennedy." The Chalnoth's voice was a low rumble. "I am Commander Krask. Welcome to your new home." David tested his restraints. "What do you want from me?" Krask's mandibles clicked in amusement. "Your expertise, human. You've demonstrated remarkable abilities. Abilities that could give the Chalnoth unparalleled power." "I won't help you weaponize innocent creatures," David spat. "Perhaps not willingly." Krask leaned in close. "But you will help us, one way or another." A commotion erupted outside. Alarms blared as weapons fire echoed through the facility. Krask snarled, barking orders into his communicator as he rushed out. David strained against his bonds, heart racing. Was this a rescue? His hopes were dashed as familiar voices approached, punctuated by the sound of struggling. The cell door slid open again. David's jaw dropped as Pollux was shoved inside, followed by several battered Chalnoth soldiers. "Pollux, what are you doing here?" The bureaucrat's compound eyes fixed on David. I came to rescue you. It seems I miscalculated." Before David could respond, Krask stormed in, rage radiating from every pore. "Pollux, you fool! Did you think we wouldn't anticipate your pathetic attempt?" Krask paced the cell, practically vibrating with fury. "No matter. This works out even better." He jabbed a claw at David. "Listen well, human. You will share every scrap of knowledge about your animal taming techniques. With that power, we'll create an unstoppable force of beastmasters to conquer the galaxy." David met Krask's gaze unflinchingly. "Never." Krask's mandibles spread in a cruel approximation of a smile. "I was hoping you'd say that." He tapped a control panel, and a section of wall slid away. Beyond the transparent barrier, a massive shape stirred in the shadows. As it emerged into the light, David felt his blood run cold. The creature was like nothing he'd ever seen. Pitch-black scales covered a sinewy frame built for speed and power. Multiple pairs of eyes glowed with feral intelligence, and wickedly curved claws scraped against the floor. "Beautiful, isn't it?" Krask's voice dripped with malice. "The umbral stalker. Even we Chalnoth have never managed to break its will. You have 24 hours to tame it, or you and your friends die. Choose wisely, human." As Krask left, David shared a look of stubborn persistence with Pollux. They needed a plan, and fast. "Any ideas?" David asked. Pollux's antennae twitched nervously. "Perhaps, but you won't like it." David studied the stalker, noting its agitated movements and signs of mistreatment. An idea began to form. "Actually," he said, "I think I might have one of my own." What followed was a frantic scramble to cobble together an escape plan. Using components salvaged from Pollux's captured squad, they jerry-rigged a device to short out the cell's force field. As alarms blared, they made a mad dash through twisting corridors. David's heart pounded as they reached the stalker's enclosure. Against Pollux's vehement protests, he triggered the release mechanism. "Are you insane?" Pollux hissed. "That thing will tear us apart." "Trust me," David replied, never taking his eyes off the emerging predator. "Hey there, big guy. Want to go home?" The stalker's multiple eyes fixed on David, nostrils flaring. For a breathless moment, it seemed poised to attack. Then, with a sound like tearing metal, it smashed through the nearest wall and bounded off into the wilderness. "After them!" Krask's enraged bellow echoed through the facility. David and Pollux plunged into the dense Kylian jungle, the sounds of pursuit close behind. They scrambled over gnarled roots and ducked under phosphorescent fronds, every sense on high alert. A high-powered bolt sizzled past David's ear. He dove for cover, dragging Pollux down with him. Krask and his troops fanned out, weapons ready. "It's over, human," Krask snarled. "Surrender now, and I might make your death quick." David's mind raced. They were outnumbered, outgunned, and cornered. But as he scanned their surroundings, he noticed something. Flashes of movement in the undergrowth, always just out of sight. A plan crystallized. David stood, hands raised. "All right, Krask, you win." Krask's mandibles spread in triumph as he stepped forward. "Finally, you show some sense." The Chalnoth's words cut off in a strangled gasp as a dark shape exploded from the foliage. The umbral stalker landed between David and his pursuers, lips peeled back in a snarl. What followed was chaos. The stalker moved like liquid shadow, effortlessly evading weapons fire while scattering Krask's forces. David and Pollux seized the opportunity, making a break for it. They reached the edge of a towering cliff, chests heaving. Krask and his remaining troops closed in, battered but still dangerous. "This ends now," Krask roared, raising his weapon. A bone-chilling shriek split the air. The stalker materialized at David's side, hackles raised as it faced down the Chalnoth. For a long moment, predator and prey locked eyes. Then Krask lowered his gun. "Fall back," he growled. "Fall back!" As the Chalnoth retreated, David turned to the stalker. "Thank you," he said softly. "You're free now. Go on. Get out of here." The creature regarded him for a moment, then melted back into the jungle without a sound. Pollux stared at David, mandibles agape. I don't understand. How did you know it would help us?" David smiled wearily. "I didn't tame it, Pollux. I just showed it respect. Sometimes that's enough." As they began the long trek back to base, Pollux's voice was thoughtful. Perhaps there is more to your species than we realized. This changes everything." David and Pollux trudged through the wreckage of the sanctuary construction site. Twisted metal and shattered glass crunched under their feet. The once bustling facility stood silent, abandoned by workers terrified of another attack. "It's worse than I feared," Pollux said, his antennae drooping. David surveyed the damage, his face set with grim dedication. "We can rebuild. We have to." They set to work, recruiting a small team of loyal Chalnoth soldiers who'd aided in their escape. Days blurred together as they toiled to repair enclosures and restore life support systems. David worked alongside the aliens, wielding tools with practiced ease. One evening, as David welded a damaged panel, a loud crash echoed through the facility. He rushed to investigate, finding a sabotaged power conduit sparking dangerously. "Krask's people," Pollux growled, examining the scene. "They won't give up easily." David nodded, already planning countermeasures. "We'll post guards, increase security sweeps. We can't let them win." Nights grew tense as David patrolled the darkened corridors. The constant vigilance wore on him, but he refused to yield. Then came the night that changed everything. A shadow moved in David's peripheral vision. He spun, taser raised, only to find himself face to face with Krask. The Chalnoth commander's eyes gleamed with hate. "Surprise, human," Krask snarled. Before David could react, Krask slammed a control panel. The ground beneath them shuddered violently. Alarms blared as the facility rocked with explosions. David sprinted toward the enclosures, heart pounding. He skidded to a halt, staring in horror at the approaching wall of lava. The deadly flow oozed inexorably closer, threatening to consume everything they'd built. In that moment, David made a choice that would echo through history. He activated the emergency release protocols, watching as cage after cage opened. The Thornmaw slithered free, followed by the Quake Boar and others. They bolted for the wilderness, escaping the encroaching inferno. Pollux arrived, mandibles clicking in distress. "What have you done? All our work, destroyed." David grabbed his friend's shoulders. "No, Pollux, this is just the beginning. These creatures will thrive out there. Show your people their true worth. The sanctuary was never about cages. It's about coexistence." Realization dawned in Pollux's compound eyes. Before he could respond, a familiar roar split the air. Krask charged toward them, weapon raised. "I'll end you both," the rogue commander bellowed. Pollux and his loyal soldiers formed a protective ring around David. Plasma bolts sizzled through the air as they traded fire with Krask's followers. The two factions clashed amid rivers of molten rock and collapsing structures. A dark shape materialized from the smoke. The umbral stalker, its obsidian scales reflecting the orange glow of lava. It fixed its gaze on Krask, lips peeling back in a savage snarl. Krask's eyes widened in terror. "No! Impossible!" The stalker lunged, its razor-sharp claws slashing through Krask's armor. The Chalnoth's scream was cut short as powerful jaws clamped around his throat. In the aftermath, David surveyed the devastation. The sanctuary lay in ruins, but a new hope had been born. He turned to Pollux, his expression solemn. "I have to stay. Make sure the systems don't harm the creatures we've released. You need to go. Spread the word of what happened here." Pollux's mandibles trembled. "David, I understand now. What you've done, it's bigger than all of us." The two embraced, an unlikely friendship forged in fire and sacrifice. As Pollux and his team retreated to safety, David turned back to face the erupting heart of the facility. He had one last job to do.
You have reached the end of the story. If you enjoyed this story and want to support us, please leave a like and subscribe to our channel. And for every comment that says 88, I will heart every single one of them. Thank you for your time.